Hi, welcome to lesson number 3. The last lesson was all about oscillators, and now we'll cover the modulation oscillator, noise, and feedback. Now, the modulation oscillator doesn't really produce sound of its own. We'll use it to modulate, to affect other oscillators. And the way it is used is very simple. You select any of these modes, for example, ring modulation, phase, position, or filter, and then you need to select which oscillator will be affected, and you cannot select two of them for each of the modes. So you can either select 1, 2, or 3, but you can't really select 1 and 3, for example. So the same goes for the phase and position and so on. Now, the filter modulation will be covered when we're talking about the filters, so we'll do that later. But for now, let's concentrate on the 3 top modes here. So ring modulation is a way for us to take an oscillator, combine it with the original oscillator, and eventually what we hear is the sum and difference of the frequencies that are generated by these two oscillators. And I know that's a kind of a weird explanation, but that's the way it is, and it's really hard to imagine what it would sound like. So all we need to do is just try. So let's select here something more simple like a sine wave, and this is how it sounds without any modulation. And I'll take the volume up. Right, and now let's have ring modulation modulate the first oscillator. So the more you play, the more you change the ring modulation knob here, then you'll get a different effect. This is really dependent also on the wave shape or the wavetable that you select here. So if you select something else, it will sound different. Let's go back to sine just for the explanation here. And now if I pitch it differently, I'll get also a different kind of effect. So you can create like metallic sounds or bell-like sounds with the ring modulation, and it's very, very useful. So we can just, let's take a reverb. So this is how it sounds. So now this is the ring modulation. The phase modulation is very similar in concept to what you might know as frequency modulation, which means that we have our carrier wave produced by our original oscillator, and then we have another oscillator riding on top of that carrier wave. And again, the best is to just try it out and listen. Let's go back to a default here. Let's take a sine wave. And this is how it sounds. So this is the idea. Now again, we need to watch from clipping, but that's what we have here. And then we have position modulation. Position modulation is really a unique kind of modulation here in Massive, and it's basically, again, if you read the manual, you'll probably get a better explanation, but it means that the more difference between the wave shape or between the frequencies that you have produced by the modulation oscillator and your original oscillator, in our case oscillator number 3, then the effect will be more prominent. So let's hear it. And again, you can play with the pitch here, change it. And that's the basic idea. Now, of course, we can modulate further by using any of our envelopes or LFOs, steppers, performers, which we'll learn later in this course. But for now, let's take just the LFO 5, grab it, drop it here on the position, and drag it. So that's the basic idea. Now, remember, you cannot use the same mode on 2 or more oscillators. You can only use it on one. So if I'm selecting here oscillator 1, that's what I have. I can't really have both 1 and 2 or 3 and so on. So that's important to remember. And each of these modes is separate in terms of the modulation options here. So if I selected whatever envelope or LFO to play with my position here, it will be solely for the position here and not for the ring modulation. So again, I can take LFO 5, drop it here. And that's it. So we'll play more with the modulation oscillator later on when we are creating our own sounds. We'll see that in action. Now, the next section is our noise section. And I'll go back to new sound here. So noise is noise, and we have all kinds of random noise generators like white noise, bright noise, brown noise, and some sampled noises like tape, metallic, aluminum, and all kinds. So what I suggest is you try it out and really listen and see what kind of ideas you get when you hear those sounds. And there are all kinds of ways to use it. So let's see some. So when I'm selecting here white noise, have a look at the analyzer. Oh, let's have the amp here, and I'm going to shut down oscillator 1. So this is how it sounds, this is how it looks. Random frequencies all over the place. And I can also play with the color. So right away, we can automate that actually. We can have like LFO, just drop it here and click and drag up. And we can use the noise as our main way to produce the sound, or we can use it together with our main sound to add something. So let's see something else. Going back to default. So I can actually have, for example, go back to envelope 4, which is coupled with my amp here, and we'll play with the decay, the levels, sharp attack. So this is some kind of a hi-hat, and we can also add some reverb. So this is the kind of ideas that we can play with, and we'll dive deeper into that in our sound design section. So that's the noise. Play with that. Try to also add it to some other sounds. And now let's go and see what is feedback. So in order for us to understand exactly what's the feedback here, then let's go to our routing tab here. And this is the entire synthesizer routing map. And you can see that all the noise generating machines are here on the left. And then we have some inserts that we can introduce, some effects. Then we have our filters, and then we have our first feedback location. So I can have my feedback routed here. What it means is that I'm grabbing the sound coming out of filter 1 right after the insert effect and route it back into the system. And that can create some saturation, some clipping, some distortion, and you need to watch out and play with the volume here with the amp until you get the right sound that you're looking for. Let's go back to new sound and introduce the feedback. So this is the idea here. So if you look again to the map here, to the routing map, then you can see that we can route the feedback right to this position. So it actually after summing both of the filters and before the amp. And you can see the label here, pre-amp, pre-A. And again, we have another one, another position right after the amp. And that's pretty much it. So again, we'll cover more of that in our sound design section. But for now, that's the idea. Play with that. Try to come up with your own sounds and your own kind of effects. And the next lesson will be the filters. And we'll see how to combine our knowledge that we gained so far with oscillators, noise, feedback, and other elements here, together with the filters, of course, to create new sounds. So see you in the next lesson. Thank you very much.